everyone. I hope today finds you happy and well. What you're about to watch is my take on a very interesting question. Will Donald Trump be elected president in January 2025? What I'm focusing on is the period from July 2024, the intense campaigning that will follow over the ensuing months, leading up to January 2025, when the new president formally takes office. I'm also going to be impartial about this. Of course, I do have my own opinions. However, my overriding concern is that I love astrology and I want astrology to be proven right. And to show you what a magnificent tool astrology is, I'll recap on the position that Donald Trump was in during his campaigning in 2016. His successful election announced in November of that year, and January 2017 when he took office. So if we bring up Donald Trump's natal chart and his progressions in 2016, let's hone in on that ascendant and his progressed sun to start with. I've added the fixed star Regulus to his birth chart because of its association with fame, wealth, honour, courage, riches. It's very tightly conjunct that ascendant, which is also in Leo. There's a very strong Mars, given how close it is to the ascendant. Now, during the second half of 2016, Donald Trump's progressed sun changed sign. It moved through the very final minutes of Leo, conjuncted Regulus, conjuncted his natal ascendant. Now that's a lot of things happening at once. Now Donald's progressed sun was in his 12th house for many years, and the shift in energy and the person's life changes quite dramatically as the progressed sun bursts through into the first house, crossing over the ascendant, and in Donald's case changing sign too. It's shifted from the sign of Leo into Virgo. During the campaigning year, Donald's progressed Mars was squaring his natal Mercury, and I think that would be testimony to the intense energy and communication needed during campaigning. I do recall the intense rivalry of that time. There was a great deal of debate and argument. Donald's progressed moon was moving through his 11th house, and shortly after the election itself, it conjuncted his Saturn. And of course, this aspect isn't a joyful combination. It's a dutiful one. I think the sheer overload of such a busy year for a man who is by now 70 years old would be caught up in this aspect, because we'd have a lot of duty, responsibilities on our shoulders. It's not a very vital aspect, so there could have been an immense tiredness now and quite low vitality. But Donald's natal Saturn closely conjuncts his Venus, and Venus rules his midheaven. So by the 20th of January, when Donald Trump was formally signed into the role of president, that progressed moon is just 2 minutes away from an exact conjunction with his natal Venus, ruler of his midheaven. His progressed Venus is around 16 degrees of Libra in 2016 and is moving into a trine with his natal Uranus and a conjunction with his Jupiter. Lastly, I looked at the transits for this period, and so transiting Jupiter was trine Donald's natal sun in January 2017. Transiting Uranus was squaring Donald's Saturn in 2016, but it was also trining his moon, and that trine to his natal moon was exact in November 2016. And so we would have seen the excitement, the invigoration and stimulus of these Uranian energies trining into his moon. Transits of Saturn would be very important during a campaign or time period when we're looking for success, because harsh aspects wouldn't be helpful. In Donald's case, transiting Saturn was trining his natal Pluto, and by November it was sextiling his Chiron and his Jupiter. So all in all, we had some intense activity, especially during the last 6 months of 2016. And we had very little by way of deeply challenging transits or progressions. There's a lot going on, so we would know this would be a really busy year. What I'm interested in is, how does 2024 look for Donald, particularly the last 6 months, which would be the campaigning period? Will I find the same intensity of progressions and transits? Will the solar arcs fill us in a little bit? As part of researching this, I was also fascinated by some of the Vedic astrology forecasts on YouTube covering the same issue. I'm no wiser as a result, because different astrologers have different approaches and different answers. In my calculations, I work on the balance of probabilities. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know whether Donald Trump will be president in January 2025. But on the balance of probabilities, I can say whether I think it's possible. I'm going to take you through now to 2024. We're fast forwarding a few months and approaching mid-year, and let's have a look at what's going on. The first chart we're going to have a look at is Trump's progressions in 2024. We have had a couple of big changes. First change is that Donald's ascendant has progressed into the sign of Scorpio now, and his progressed moon is also in the sign of Scorpio. So if we think about the Scorpio 8th house connotations here, we have, of course, transformation, crisis, other people's money, taxes, and indeed these are important issues even now. But if we take a look at that progressed Venus, can you see how it is moving into a square with his natal Saturn? So if Donald Trump was campaigning in the second half of 2024, Venus applying to Saturn would become exact during the campaigning period. And this is a heartbreak progression. It indicates great sadness, sorrows. There could be a potential for financial problems given Venus's symbolisms, but I do suspect it's chiefly sorrows. And it's of great importance to us because Venus is his midheaven ruler. His progressed moon makes that move into Scorpio in February of 2024. It will form a sextile with his progressed sun for some of the campaigning period. I would see that as favourable, but as the campaigning period draws to a close, in the month of November, when we would be expecting the election results, his progressed moon is squaring his natal Pluto. That is a difficult few weeks, very difficult emotionally, and I'd need to see a couple of favourable aspects to balance this one out. That same progressed Venus has trined Donald's natal sun, but is pulling away by well over a degree in the last few months of 2024. We can also see that Donald's progressed Mars is applying to a conjunction with his natal Chiron. This aspect can increase a person's vitality and energy levels, and in fact can show a time when the person is belligerent and more aggressive than usual. Chiron represents our wounds where we feel inadequate or less than, and Donald's will to achieve is under duress here. Vulnerabilities and chinks in his armour may be exposed, and this is something that carries on through into 2025 too. I was hoping that Donald's transits in 2024 would fill in the picture a bit more. The most dramatic of these is the fact that transiting Uranus is going to conjunct his midheaven, and the first exact contact is in June 2024. We can't always be sure which way a Uranus transit's going to play out, because Uranus is by its very nature unpredictable. We can be clear that this is a very invigorating transit, when things speed up rapidly. Life will certainly not be dull, particularly around Donald's career or his public role in the world. And it's this transit that makes me feel confident that Trump is probably entering into the intense campaigning in the second half of 2024. I understand that candidates are selected by their party now, and that this is a process that unfolds in July. There's an intense burst of energy in Donald's chart around July 2024, and that's because transiting Uranus has moved over his midheaven and is now squaring his natal Mars. And particularly looking at the mid-July period, transiting Mars has joined transiting Uranus, and both are squaring Donald's natal Mars. So this is a real rush of energy, of will. I wouldn't rule out anger, rashness, impulsivity at this time, but there is this crystallization of energy mid next year. And that same transiting Uranus has also been sextiling Donald's natal Saturn-Venus conjunction. Remember, Venus is the ruler of his midheaven. So this is a highly electric and alive time, full of stimulation, of intense interchange and non-stop activity. Transiting Jupiter is also going to be active. It's moving through the sign of Gemini and initially makes a conjunction to Donald's Uranus in August. Uranus and Jupiter are very well aspected in Donald's natal chart. There is a near exact trine. And so this transit will probably operate on a very lucky, favourable kind of level. Perhaps a campaigning environment brings together something that will work in Donald's favour. By September 2024, transiting Jupiter has moved on and is opposing his natal moon. It just falls short of conjuncting his sun, yet it's a degree and a half out of orb. It's too far away for my confidence levels. November 2024 is when we would start expecting election results, and it would be quite early in the month. But at this time, Jupiter has moved away from that opposition to the moon, and it's no longer in orb to Donald's natal Uranus. I looked closely at Saturn as well. Transiting Saturn will square Donald's natal Uranus in 2024, and it will be first exact in mid-May. I don't see transiting Saturn being particularly helpful for Donald, and neither is it a deal breaker. I double checked for Saturn in Donald's progressed chart too. I noticed that his progressed Sun is applying to a semi-square with his natal Saturn, and that this will become exact in 2025. So I've had a lot of information to look at. The astrological activity in Donald's chart in late 2016, leading up to 2017, was stunning. I cannot see that level of favourable and positive aspects in 2024-25. There are some helpful aspects, but there are others that show sadness, difficulty, slowing down. In an attempt to narrow down the field a little more, I considered the positions of transiting Neptune and transiting Pluto, because an interesting aspect that is formed to Donald's ascendant is the fact that both Pluto and Neptune will both be forming an inconjunct to his ascendant, i.e. the finger of God formation, with the ascendant at the apex. And so with that 6th, 8th house energy of health or crisis or loss, will this play a major part in late 2024 too? Donald Trump is an eclipse man, born on an eclipse. And in April, there is eclipse activity opposing his natal Neptune and Jupiter, so not personal planets. The activity is in his 8th house, and the flavour of the particular eclipse is one of intuitive leaps and bounds of good ideas and inspiration. However, there's no positive eclipse activity making close aspects during the second half of 2024. And if we look at the ephemeris positions for January 2025, these are not what I would expect for somebody who was about to take the presidential office. I looked at the solar returns for Donald. in particular for 2016's year ahead, for 2020, and again for 2024. Not all astrologers use solar returns, and they do have to be carefully considered in relation to the natal chart. But sometimes the activity on the solar return angles is so intense that we have a pretty good flavour of what the year holds. And this is the case with Donald's solar returns. If I bring those up now, let's have a look at 2016. And you can see that Leo ascendant, the Uranus on the midheaven, the Sun and Venus are conjunct together and sextiling that Uranus. And here we have 2020, the year when Donald was ousted from office. You can see that the solar sun is in the 12th and squared by that Mars-Neptune-Moon conjunction. We can't be sure where Donald will be resident on his June birthday in 2024, but I've played with a few of his main residences, and the outcome is not good. There's that nasty T-square with Saturn, Sun, Moon. The Saturn Moon straddles the MC axes. It squares Sun and Mercury, and that's a heavy 12th house. It's really not promising. So although a picture is never entirely negative, this isn't probably a year of roses, trophies and medals for Donald Trump. There were so many factors to take into account, including a Uranus-Jupiter conjunction by transit in Donald Trump's 10th house. But on balance, I felt there simply was not enough to indicate that here is the United States' next president. I hope you found this informative. It was impossible to cover things from every angle. Time may prove me entirely wrong. Take care.